Today I'm going to talk about sources of self-efficacy and a coach's or instructor's role in recreational youth sport. According to psychologist Bandura, self-efficacy is one's belief in his or her own capabilities to perform a given task or skill. Bandura's theory stated there were 4 determinants to self-efficacy. First, mastery experience, which is the ability to overcome obstacles or improve results. Social persuasion, the second determinant, is verbal persuasion or encouragement from an outside source. Next is vicarious experiences, which would be watching others and learning from their success. Finally is physiological and emotional states, which is when fatigue or pain is perceived as weakness and negative or positive moods have an effect on self-efficacy. 2 more psychologists named Lent and Lopez extended Bandura's theory by adding 2 more forms of efficacy perceptions. The first is other efficacy, which is the beliefs one has about another's abilities, like a coach believing in his or her athlete's performance. The second is relation-inferred self-efficacy, which I will henceforth be referring to as RISE. RISE is someone's perception about what others believe about his or her capabilities. There were 4 studies conducted in 2008, 2009, 2012, and 2013 by psychologists to find out the connections between self-efficacy beliefs and RISE. These studies were done with elite-level athletes as well as with teenagers in a physical educational context. Results of these studies showed that self-efficacy beliefs were based not only on Bandura's 4 determinants, but also on other efficacy and RISE. It was found that RISE increases positive, psychological, and behavioral effects, as well as increased the amount of physical activity being done during leisure time. The only problem with these studies is none of them were done for the youth level. It was hypothesized that at that level, there is minimal experience to base self-efficacy beliefs on. Because sports are just being introduced and motor skills are still being perfected, children are more likely to make errors or fail at the task rather than succeed on their first try. Studies were therefore conducted to verify if RISE is what bases children's first self-efficacy beliefs. The first study was a 2-week recreational sport camp where researchers would determine the sources of self-efficacy and how RISE affected children. The second study was observation of recreationally competitive sport participants throughout a whole season. Here, they would determine the sources of self-efficacy during a longer season and again how RISE affected the participants. The results from both studies were fairly similar. It was found in both cases sources of self-efficacy were mastery experience, social persuasion, and vicarious experience. It was also found that verbal and nonverbal cues from RISE largely affected the participants. Nonverbal cues that the children identified in the first and second study were challenges or special opportunities, focused interpersonal attention and expressiveness. Verbal cues that the children identified in the first and second studies were general encouragement, efficiency-building statements, and instruction. The only difference between the 2 studies was the verbal cues in the second study also had task-orientated statements, allowing for sport self-confidence and athlete motivation. There are many examples when a coach could use RISE themes to help their young athletes. For example, Jamie is playing on a volleyball team for the very first time. She isn't very good yet because she hasn't really practiced the skills. It is important as her coach to interact with her verbally with 1, general encouragement like, "You're doing great." 2, efficiency-building statements like, "I believe you can get the serve over the net." 3, instruction like, "Watch the ball hit your arms when you pass." And 4, task-orientated statements like, "It doesn't matter if you hit the ball as long as you focus on getting your approach right." It's also important to remember those nonverbal interactions, being 1, focused interpersonal attention, so working one-on-one with Jamie to make sure she really understands the technique. 2, expressiveness, so cheering, high fives, and smiling to encourage Jamie to keep performing well. And 3, challenging or special opportunities, like having Jamie demonstrate the forearm pass or a drill because she's improving on her skills and deserves recognition. In conclusion, as a coach at the youth level, it is important to remember the RISE themes in order to help young athletes establish their self-efficacy beliefs so they will continue building on those beliefs and continue living actively and playing sports.